This detail completely changes how we look at things, as Patrick Waugh has left the door open to make roster decisions for the New York Islanders that really nobody was expecting. We're going to break it all down on this episode of Islanders Digest. We are getting closer and closer to the start of the regular season for the New York Islanders. This is going to start on October 7th, and what this means is we are going to get some final cuts really soon, and the Islanders have already really trimmed down their roster compared to other teams. I think it's very clear that with all the competition, Patrick Waugh really wants to zone in on the players who have a fair shot in making this team. And as a result, we have a really good idea of what the Islanders roster is going to be open tonight. But there still are questions that have yet to be answered, as I think there are several young players who still have a legitimate shot to make this team. And Patrick Waugh is keeping that door wide open. Before we break down who these players are and what their chances really are, if you have not already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Our goal is 2,000 subscribers before the start of the season. Appreciate your support as we continue to make Islanders content every single day. Didn't make a video yesterday. It was my birthday, so I took the day off. We are back talking about the New York Islanders, and these are the lines for Wednesday's skate, and there is a lot of certainty with this lineup. We basically know who are going to be the top 9 for the Islanders. We don't really know how it's going to be shaken up. I think this is going to be changed throughout the season. And I think other than the centers, I think there's going to be a lot of movement in the Islanders lineup. But what we have here that is really interesting is at the morning skate, once again, Calum Ritchie is centering the fourth line with Casey Ciziquez and Maxim Siplakov. And I think this is Patrick Waugh showing that even if Calum Ritchie cannot take Pageau's spot, because it looks like Pageau's spot is set in stone until the Islanders trade him. I don't think they're going to move him off of center. That's where his value is. But Patrick Waugh is showing here that there is another route for Calum Ritchie to make this team, and he's getting a second look in a fourth line role where I will note he looked pretty good in last game. Now, typically, I would not want Calum Ritchie, your top center prospect, playing on the fourth line. That's not what he's going to be. His absolute floor at this point at the NHL is a third line center, and that is the floor. I really think Calum Ritchie is likely going to be a second line center, and he has a chance to still prove himself to be a first line center. I think that's more what this player is. But when you look at this fourth line, it's not really a traditional fourth line where you have a player like Siplakov. Casey Ciziquez is playing there as well. And also, Duclair is expected to take reps on this line. Now, this might be because Drouin is out, and no worry about Jonathan Drouin. He is just sick. So I expect him to be in the opening right roster for the New York Islanders. Also, Anders Lee is in a full contact jersey again, so he also is expected to play in the first game for the New York Islanders. What this is really doing, because I believe this is going to be the lines that we see in the Islanders' final preseason game, as I believe this is going to be a dress rehearsal type thing, is Patrick Waugh is giving Calum Ritchie a chance to make this team on a fourth line role, which is something that a lot of us did not really expect. And at first, as I said before, I was very cautious of this. I didn't like this idea, but looking at this fourth line, it really is more of a third line. In fact, last season, this is pretty much what the Islanders would have been rolling out as a third line type line for a good portion of that season. When Ciziquez plays on the wing, he typically plays on the third line. And where I can see this working is if you play him in a limited role, really get his feet wet in NHL games, but play him on the power play. If you're playing him on the second power play and also giving him these fourth line minutes, I think it can make sense for Calum Ritchie to stick around the Islanders on a fourth line role. Maybe see if anyone gets injured to give him a more permanent spot on the roster where he can really prove himself in the top 9. But this is something I think is really interesting. Now, realistically, I don't think it's going to happen. I still think it's better for him to play more minutes in the AHL, which is why I think while Calum Ritchie has looked great, and for me, this is totally fine. Calum Ritchie has come as advertised. He's done everything he could to make this camp. I have no issue, especially considering he is just 20 years old, with the Islanders sending him down for a little more seasoning in the AHL. Again, the AHL would still be the highest level of hockey he's ever played at. So there's really nothing wrong with that. And just with the showing he's had in preseason, I am already super excited about that return for the Brock Nelson trade. Him not making the team does not make the trade any worse. It's just the Islanders change plans, and there's a lot more depth on this lineup than I think people were expecting, and perhaps what Lou Lamoriello was expecting when he said that Calum Ritchie would be playing next season. A lot changed with Mathew Darche, and I have no doubt that by the end of the season, Calum Ritchie is going to play the games in the NHL. I just believe at this point in time, while the door is open, I think ultimately they're going to start Ciziquez in that center role. But again, I have not been happy with Casey Ciziquez's play at center, and I'm not talking about the preseason. I'm really more talking about last season. He really seems like he's lost a few steps from when he was a very effective fourth line player. So we'll see what happens there. Perhaps he has a shorter leash, and if things don't work out, the Islanders will bring Calum Ritchie back up. Again, this is an Islanders team that I think there's a lot of questions in this lineup. And if the Islanders are not scoring early in the season, if they're not playing well defensively, there are going to be a lot of people asking about Calum Ritchie. Now, with this roster, we also have a definitive update on the goaltending situation. And a lot of fans are concerned. For me, I think the goaltending is just okay. Sorokin, obviously, is a great goaltender. A lot of fans are disappointed that Hogberg did not get a better chance to make this team. For the record, Hogberg was awful last season. Now, I don't think Rittich earned this job from his play in the preseason, but he has played better in the NHL in the past. And this move makes a lot of sense to send Hogberg down, just for the simple fact that while nobody is going to claim Hogberg, there's not a shot that some team is going to claim Hogberg, especially considering his age at 31. I think there was a chance that a team would pick up Rittich if they are really struggling in the goaltending position. So I think this makes sense. Now, if Rittich continues to struggle and has a few bad games, I think it's going to be a very short leash. We don't know when Varlamov is going to return. We still are not getting updates. All Patrick Waugh has told us is that he's skating on his own, the same as Pierre Engvall. This is not ideal. I was more optimistic earlier in the offseason when we got that update that Varlamov was skating. At this point, he's been skating for weeks and weeks, and he has not progressed to really facing any shots. Something is clearly wrong. I don't know if it's his knee or it's his groin. I'm really hoping it's his groin because that's something he's dealt with throughout his career. We've seen him return from that. If there are complications from that knee surgery, then not looking good for seeing Varlamov back in this lineup. And as I've said throughout the offseason, the best version of this lineup is one that has Varlamov in it. And finally, Patrick Waugh has also left the door open for a rookie defenseman that we're hoping to make the lineup. Now, I'm not talking about Matthew Schaefer. While the Islanders will not guarantee this, he still has to earn it. Let's face it, Matthew Schaefer has already made this club. It is very obvious. Even when he's practicing, he is practicing on the third pair. He's playing on the second power play unit consistently, and Patrick Waugh has been working rigorously on that unit. So if you were not sure that Schaefer was going to be on this club, you would have somebody else playing in that spot because that is something that seriously needs to improve for the Islanders. Patrick Waugh also left the door open for Isaiah George to make this team, saying the Islanders could keep 8 defensemen, which is something that we really have not talked about because it did not seem like that was going to be the case. Typically, a team keeps 1 extra defenseman and 2 extra forwards. Those extra forwards would be McLean and Gatcomb, and that extra defenseman would be Bovequist. But Patrick Waugh is saying here that Isaiah George can still be that 8th defenseman. And while I think it's great that Patrick Waugh is keeping this door open, and what this really does is tell Isaiah George that he had a good training camp, and if he gets sent down, it is not a knock on him. Because, again, I think Isaiah George has been really good this training camp. In fact, if it wasn't for the fact that he could be sent down without going to waivers, I think this is a really interesting decision. I don't think it's much of a decision. If Isaiah George could be sent down and would have to go through waivers if he was sent down, it would be Adam Bovequist or one of the forwards getting sent down because he can get sent down. And really, he's only played 40 AHL games. I think the best decision is for the Islanders to tell him he had a great training camp, have him be the first guy up. Again, if somebody gets hurt, you can still have him get called up and play that game. He doesn't have to be the 8th defenseman to be the first call up. But for me, it does not make sense for Isaiah George to make this club if he is not playing every single day. So while I appreciate he still is with the roster currently, and it's great for him to get more practice with the NHL guys, at this point in his development, it's still best for him to go down the AHL and play every single game in meaningful minutes. Now, in a year from now, that answer might, and for the record, I think in a year from now, Isaiah George is a mainstay on this defense. But if it was later on in his career, I think I would have a different answer. But considering where Isaiah George is, and only playing like 30 or so games in the AHL, it just makes sense for him to go back down, although he has had a really good training camp. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think Calum Ritchie is going to make this team? Do you think Isaiah George is going to make this team? As of right now, I think the only rookie that is going to make the Islanders is going to be Matthew Schaefer. That's just how it looks at this point. But I can really see the argument for sending down, especially Kyle McLean instead. He really has not impressed me. Would not want to send Gatcomb down because I think there's a small chance a team does claim him. I think there is a small chance Kyle McLean gets claimed as well. But with Calum, Ritchie, and Danny Nelson coming by the end of the season, not too concerned about losing a player like Kyle McLean. And I actually wonder if the Islanders are also considering looking through that waiver wire. Because even if these players, even as Isaiah George is sent down, even if Calum Ritchie sent down, and you don't need an extra roster spot, I might still make the argument where it might be worth it to drop a player like McLean or even Gatcomb if you can get a better player on the waiver wire. It's going to be really interesting to see what shows up on the waiver wire, especially if there's a younger forward who just struggled with another team who's around like 24 years old who still has potential. I would maybe like to see the Islanders pick a player up like that. And once we know who is sent down on waivers, I will look through the list and talk about players who I think might be better players for the Islanders to pick up rather than holding on to Kyle McLean. But until then, let me know what you think about this opening night roster for the New York Islanders. I'm your host, Patrick Nilan. Catch you on the next episode of Islanders Digest. Let's go, Islanders.